The ring-spire Colosseum shimmered in the exosphere like a crown forged by mad poets. 10 spiral tiers of crystal, bone, and war-forged alloy spinning slowly around a gas giant the color of jaundiced regret. Inside, species from over 1,000 systems howled, pulsed, clicked, and emitted victory pheromones into the recycled air. The scent was equal parts metal, cinnamon, ozone, and fear sweat. Someone had spilled fermented glax nectar near the VVIP balconies. A fight was about to start, and the collective nervous system of the galaxy knew it. This wasn't just a duel. It was a political thesis made flesh, a ritual in the Grand Accord's endless attempt to turn war into theater, ritualized combat instead of annihilation. Peace through pointed spectacle. The trial of precision. The audience didn't come for resolution. They came for ritual humiliation. Today's main attraction? A long-awaited, corrective demonstration. The Krylock Dominion, sharp-shelled, proud, and offensively symmetrical, had finally convinced the Galactic Council to allow a formal challenge against Earth's representative. The outcome, they promised, would be quick, clean, and condescending. Humans had been a curiosity at best since their accidental entry into the Council. Earth was the galactic equivalent of a dinner guest who showed up barefoot, spilled sauce on the carpet, and inexplicably solved the host's centuries-old encryption problem during dessert. Their limbs flailed when they moved. Their bones cracked audibly. They used sarcasm where diplomacy would suffice. They cried during sporting events. They were, the consensus held, deeply strange and perpetually off balance. But worst of all, they were lucky. They had no claws, no neural venom, no prehensile thought filaments. And yet somehow, they kept surviving. Thriving, even. No one could quite agree why. Theories ranged from chaotic adaptive cognition to they cheat at physics. Hence today. Esteemed witnesses and casually homicidal bystanders, boomed the announcer, a sentient hexagonal prism named Jor-Killith. You gather now to witness the humbling of a primitive species. A reminder that tradition matters, elegance wins, and coordination is not optional. The crowd screamed approval, or whatever its species-specific approximation might be. A hive of gelatinous diplomats flared bioluminescent patterns in unison. The Tvel choir intoned a choral disapproval of Earth's fashion sense. A delegation of sentient gas clouds formed mocking silhouettes of flailing human limbs. Jor-Killith pirouette midair, shifting to its performance color palette. On the far end of the arena, it announced, emerging from the Krylock Dominion's victory chambers, the Warden of 6 Wars, the Scourge of Spiral Sector 9, the one, the only, General RRRZ-Na. A section of the arena floor peeled open like a metal flower vomiting fury. RRRZ-Na rose from below on a pedestal of bone and magma-lit glass. 4 arms raised. Each claw tipped in ceremonial venom. A chorus of scythes on metal rang behind him. His exoskeleton gleamed with engraved conquests. His eyes, deep amber and wholly unimpressed, surveyed the arena like a god assessing a buffet. RRZ-Na didn't smile. Krylocks didn't smile. Their faces weren't built for nuance. They conveyed superiority through stillness, and right now, he was still as an accusation. And facing him, the announcer hesitated, the next words arriving with forced politeness, representing the planet Earth, is Lieutenant Mira Ellen Voss. No pedestal, no fanfare, no backlight. A side door hissed open, the kind used for janitors and medical bots, and out stepped Mira Voss. She was average height, if one squinted hard and tilted their head generously. Her armor looked half regulation and half scavenged. A matte black rifle was slung lazily over one shoulder. No insignia. No medals. Her gait was relaxed. She chewed on something, possibly caffeinated, without interest in the crowd. The laughter began slowly. The hive minds of TKLTI resonated in mock sympathy. The Christian barristers scribbled eulogies. One vendor began selling commemorative Splat Happens shirts, featuring a caricature of Mira flattened beneath a Krylock claw. She walked across the obsidian floor like it was a sidewalk on a rainy Tuesday. From the observation platform, Counselor BRYXX of the Gloruvian Axis leaned toward his aide. This is what humans consider elite. She is a sniper, the aide replied, uncertain. BRWXX blinked his tertiary lid. She's limping. She might be pretending to. Why would she do that? The aide didn't answer. No one did. In the arena, Mira stopped at the designated combat point. Ararzina towered over her, a full 2 meters taller, radiating threat in every limb. He raised one claw in a theatrical sweep. "I do not enjoy crushing insects," he said in Galactic Standard. "Then don't," Mira replied flatly. Ararzina hissed. "Your death will be art." Mira didn't blink. "Just try not to monologue during it." The Krylock turned slightly, checking with his honor scribes. "What is monologue?" "Exactly," she muttered, flicking her gaze to the upper scaffold, to wind vectors, to gravity readouts, to the angle of a half-burnt reflector panel near the edge. The duel hadn't even begun, but she was already playing. Jor-Killith spiraled higher. Begin the trial of precision. Observe as elegance meets entropy. As the clumsy collide with the choreographed. The crowd roared as the arena shifted configuration. Floating platforms ignited, plasma vents cycled in patterns, gravity pockets adjusted like bellows in a forge. The arena never repeated itself. Every trial was a new equation. Every equation was meant to favor the graceful. Today, however, that equation had a variable the council hadn't accounted for. Mira rolled her shoulders once, then crouched. Across from her, Ararzina uncoiled like a loaded spring. The signal dropped, and Earth's clumsiest killer went to war. Ararzina had studied the art of killing for 73 cycles. Not through simulation or theory, but in the sacred, screaming chaos of conquest. He had shattered mantis things on Ch-Thon, flayed the storm dwellers of Drelix with his bare claws, and ejected 3 mercenary fleets from orbit using nothing but timing and contempt. His victories were etched into his exoskeleton with acid script. Entire species had learned to flinch when he flexed. So when he looked across the arena at Miravos, 5 nothing with a hunched posture and a rifle that looked like it had survived a garage fire, he did not feel fear. He felt irritation. This was beneath him. His honor scribes fluttered behind him, whispering ceremonial phrases. Elegant posture engages elegance. Strike downward, not forward. Crush, don't cleave. The audience admires control. He nodded. He wouldn't simply win. He would demonstrate. He would educate. Meanwhile, Mira crouched beside a half-melted vent shaft and adjusted her rifle's neural sync with a practiced, almost affectionate thumb press. Her fingers moved with lazy precision, too fast for the cameras to catch unless slowed down by a factor of 10. She could feel the field shifting around her, gravity swell in Quadrant 7, magnetic distortion arcing near the reflector node by the western strut. The arena liked to play pretend with randomness, but it was never truly chaotic. Just engineered complexity. And complexity could be mapped. She made a mental note. 5 seconds between pulse distortions. Enough time to set a bait angle. Across the arena, Ararzina lifted all 4 arms and let out a thunderous roar, carefully calibrated for audience acoustics. Dust trembled. A few less firm species in the front rows blinked out of local time for a moment. The cheers were instant, deafening. Mira licked her dry lip. She didn't care about the crowd. They were useful only as cover, distractions that spoke too loudly and looked in all the wrong places. This wasn't her first arena. She had fought in jungles where the foliage whispered your name back to you before bullets did. She had pulled breath through cracked ribs in low orbit. She had once spent 8 days in a foxhole on a dead moon with no backup and a rifle that jammed every 3rd shot. She'd learned one thing above all. Being underestimated wasn't a weakness. It was armor. Counselor BRWXX, still watching from the observation platform, squinted his lower eye stalks. She's crouching oddly. Maybe that's her species' pre-attack posture, his aide offered. It looks orthopedic. Below, Jor-Killith resumed commentary. For those unfamiliar with human biomechanics, Lieutenant Voss's gait may appear inefficient. That's because it is. Note the lack of biological stabilizers, the brittle knee joints, the meat-based sensory clusters exposed on her face. An evolutionary farce, really. Laughter from the audience, A low, vibrating sea of amusement. RRZNA launched forward, moving with a fluid brutality that belied his mass. The air rippled behind him as he cleared 20 meters in a single bound, claws slicing outward in a ceremonial X-strike. Mira rolled to the left, not gracefully, not cleanly. It looked like she stumbled into the move by accident. She hit the ground hard, let her shoulder take the impact, then fired a shot behind her back, mid-slide. The round sparked off a reflector dish above her and vanished. The crowd paused. Had she missed? Ah, chirped Jor Killith. An aggressive warning shot. Or perhaps a cry for help. No, Mira thought. That was calibration. She flipped to her feet and disappeared behind a rising slab of terrain, breathing steady. Her heartbeat slowed. Every inch of the arena was a variable. And she was the only one here solving for X. RRZNA landed with a force that cracked the floor. He hissed, confused by her dodge. Not just the evasion, but the intent. He was used to resistance. What he wasn't used to was irreverence. He paced, slow and deliberate, letting the cameras catch his glistening carapace. "You are unworthy of spectacle," he called. "Your end will not be art." Mira muttered into her mic, knowing no one was on the other end. "Good. I'm allergic to art." She crept along a ridge as the gravity surged. 1.2 G now, enough to slow jumps, enough to throw off momentum. Her boots shifted magnetically, sticking for a half-second longer than usual. That was new. Someone had tweaked the settings. No matter. That just meant she'd have to fire earlier. She adjusted again, recalibrating on the fly. Down in the pit, RRZNA charged again, this time a spinning strike, claws wide, a maneuver designed to catch dodgers in its sweeping arc. Mira didn't dodge. She dropped. Not collapsed. Dropped. Straight down into a newly formed vent channel beneath the field. The crowd gasped, some in laughter, some in confusion, a few in pity. It looked like she'd fallen. Again. But Mira was already in motion, counting the ricochet timing in her head. 3, 2, 1. She fired upward into the reflective casing of the arena's central telemetry node. The shot bounced once, twice, vanished. A moment later, it hit the secondary elevation motor just behind RRZNA's left flank, throwing sparks and seizing the platform beneath him. He stumbled, half a step, barely visible. But it was the first time in years anything had made him stumble. The laughter in the crowd stuttered. "Curious," said Jor Killith. "Perhaps not entirely unintentional." Counselor BRYXX's aide leaned forward. "Sir, I think she's not just reacting. She's baiting." Mira knelt again, checked her next angle. The terrain was shifting in her favor now. Not because the arena had become kind, but because she'd mapped its moods like a poem. Every rhythm had its beat. Every beat had its break. She whispered to herself, 3 more rounds. Then the pattern breaks. Then I break him. And for the first time, RRZNA looked toward the shadows, not for a victim, but for a threat. The arena was not built for fairness. It was a weaponized cathedral of spectacle, carefully calibrated to favor power over precision. The Krylock had helped design it centuries ago. Wide-open kill zones, dynamic elevation plates, randomized gravity currents. It punished patience and rewarded aggression. There were rules, yes, but rules written in the same ink as comedy scripts. They allowed projectiles, but capped their speed. They permitted stealth, but flooded the field with thermal fog. They welcomed humans, but assumed they'd die before exploiting the loopholes. Mira had read the rulebook twice. Then she'd started writing her own. In the center field, RRZNA had claimed high ground, a spire of carbon-laced alloy erupting from the shifting floor like an ancient tooth. He posed there, his 4 arms stretched in calculated menace. Every movement was theater. Every step, a statement. His claws scraped trails into the metal, like he meant to autograph his victory. The crowd adored it. Below him, Mira crouched near a cracked terrain node, breath slow and even. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't grimacing either. Her expression was pure stillness. She was running equations in her head like prayers. 4 ricochet points mapped. 3 movement vectors active. 2 gravity zones destabilizing. 1 shot in the chamber. She adjusted her rifle's tension coil by a quarter notch and whispered, "You ready, Finch?" Finch did not reply. Finch was metal and silence and potential. The terrain pulsed. A fresh cycle initiated. Gravity dipped to 0.8 g. Air pressure rose. Visibility dropped by 15% as steam vents belched across the east quadrant. That was Myra's signal. She moved. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just enough to reposition between 2 ridgelines before the elevation slabs rotated again. RRZ spotted the motion and leapt. It wasn't a jump so much as a small war against physics. His body blurred, his momentum terrifying. He aimed to land on her, crush her with all the weight and disdain his dominion had to offer. Mira fired once. The round didn't hit him. It didn't need to. It struck a balancing strut holding up a plasma vent just behind her, triggering a minor collapse. Debris cloud. Shifting heat signature. Confusion. By the time RRRZ landed, Mira was already gone, vanished behind a veil of smoke and data interference. The crowd roared in confusion. Not for her evasion, but for what it suggested. This wasn't random luck. This wasn't desperate scrambling. She was controlling the chaos. RRRZ spun, bellowed. "Coward! Show yourself." Mira said nothing. Her voice didn't need to travel. Her message was already in motion, shaped into tungsten, spinning through reflections, bouncing from point to point. A slow symphony of misdirection. The crowd began to shift uneasily. In the observation booth, Counselor BRYXX's aide murmured, "Is this strategy?" "She's exploiting the secondary architecture," BRYXX said, stunned. "No one's done that in a century. It's barely mapped. She's mapping it in real time." Back in the field, Mira ran diagonals. Never a straight path, always 2 moves ahead of her own position. She used terrain like punctuation, pausing briefly behind cover, pivoting only when the angle made a ricochet viable. Her boots clung briefly to vertical plates, magnetic soles activating just long enough to pull off a shot, then release. She fired again. Another miss. Deliberate. The bullet pinged off an aerial reflector node and lodged into a coolant vent 50 meters away. On the scoreboard, the system marked it as an errant discharge. The crowd laughed. But RRRZ hesitated. He'd heard that tone before. Not a failure. A setup. He dashed again, this time aiming to pin her into a corner. The arena groaned as he collided with a flexing wall panel. He slashed. Nothing. She wasn't there. Behind him, a small red dot flared on his lower left shoulder. Just for a moment. Just long enough to unsettle. He spun and launched a plasma disc into the shadows, scoring a direct hit on a column that cracked in half. Still no Mira. She was already 10 meters behind him, setting the angle for her next shot. A triple bounce, reflector plate, angled floor seam, reinforced shield array. Fired. The bullet snapped into motion, unseen, unheard, delayed. She moved again. RRZ was growling now. His arms twitched. His stance widened. He was abandoning ceremony. He wanted blood. Wanted it to splatter. Wanted it to scream. But all he got was silence and geometry. Mira took her time lining up the 4th shot. It was theatrical now, but only for her. The arena was finally catching on. Her earlier mistakes were data. The arena itself had become her weapon. Gravity shifted again. 1.3 g now. Heavier. Slower. The kind of shift that ruined footwork, unless you anticipated it. RRRZ stumbled. It was half a second. Barely a sway. Mira struck. The 5th shot, a clean arc from a polished node near the north vent, pinged off 2 surfaces and clipped his forward foot. Just enough to unbalance. The crowd gasped. A crylock. Unbalanced. RRRZ tried to recover with a twist, but Mira was already ahead. She fired again. Straight shot. No ricochet. Hit him center mass. Non-lethal zone. Armor held. No damage. But it hurt. He shrieked. Not from pain. From disbelief. She'd made contact. And she was still moving. In the observation box, Jorkillith finally whispered, "This is not a duel. This is an autopsy in progress." Birwex's aide looked nauseous. In the arena, Mira stopped moving. She stood still. Ararzina turned to her fully now, breathing hard, shell gleaming with stress moisture. He wasn't smiling. Couldn't. But he understood. This wasn't a mistake. She hadn't stumbled. She had made him trip. He charged with all four claws forward, abandoning the rules, the ceremony, the Dominion's decorum. And Mira said softly, "There you are." She knelt and took aim. The final angle was ready. All the ricochets had set the line. All the misses had built the path. Now, the round would travel straight. Through everything he didn't see coming. Mira squeezed the trigger like she was turning a page in a quiet room. No flourish, no thunder. Just the sharp crack of inevitability. The round left the barrel in a blink and vanished into the path she'd carved with precision and deceit. An invisible corridor shaped by chaos, timing, and an intimate understanding of physics that made most AI blush. The bullet was already past its second bounce before Ararzina's claws closed around empty air. It kissed the corner of a scorched deflector node, ricocheted through the narrow cooling vent she'd cracked open 3 minutes ago, curved ever so slightly through a microgravity seam, and emerged from a blind angle just behind his left mandible. There was no sound when it hit him. No explosion. Just a soft, sickening click, the sound of a hard reset inside something that had never been told, no. Ararzina froze mid-stride. His forward momentum slowed, then stopped completely. One claw twitched, spasmed. His eyes, amber and burning, dimmed like twin suns choked in fog. He dropped to one knee. Mira didn't move. Not even to confirm the hit. She didn't need to. She knew that round better than she knew her own heartbeat. She'd measured its travel time by the microsecond. It had gone where it was told. Ararzina collapsed a breath later, his massive form folding in on itself like a monument built on faulty pride. No theatrics. No roar. Just the weighted slump of inevitability landing on ancient arrogance. The silence that followed was cavernous. It spread across the Colosseum like a virus, smothering cheers mid-syllable, reducing speculation to raw disbelief. Even the automated systems hesitated. Scoreboards froze. A slow spiral of confused glyphs flickered into view, then blinked out again. No one had programmed for this. Jorkillith's projection dimmed to a pale yellow, the AI equivalent of a stroke. Outcome, pending, it whispered. Error. Outcome not predicted. Please stand by. In the Krylock delegation box, confusion collapsed into fury. One official hurled a ceremonial dagger at the wall and demanded a rematch. Another muttered about sabotage, treason, ancestral curses. Their language didn't have a word for checkmate, but suddenly they needed one. Counselor Bryxx slowly removed his translation buds. He blinked twice, tilted his main eye toward his aide, and exhaled something close to a laugh. "So," he said, "humans fall with purpose." His aide just nodded, lips pale. "That shot, how many surfaces did it bounce from?" "5," Mira said aloud, still in the arena. Her voice carried, sharp and flat as a ruler across knuckles. The 6th was a lie. He stepped into it. She turned away from Ararzina's inert body without ceremony. Finch was slung back over her shoulder. Her movements didn't celebrate. They declared. She walked with the unhurried pace of someone whose job was done and had been done precisely. Above her, the Colosseum lights attempted to flicker celebratory hues, but even the programming seemed confused. There were no protocols for a victory like this. No parade routine for quiet clinical dismantling. In the corner of the arena, a vendor switched his holographic merch to display Myra's outline, just a silhouette with the words, "Oops." Sales spiked immediately. Jor Killith rebooted into speech. By technical and interpretive consensus, the winner is, gods forgive me, Lieutenant Mira Ellen Voss of Earth. The crowd erupted, but not in joy. Not in rage, either. The noise was a compound equation of awe, existential dread, recalculation, and a deep, unspoken question. How many more are there like her? Backstage, Mira was met by no entourage, no handlers. Only Elias, her spotter, leaning against a wall with his arms crossed and a half-smirk threatening to escape containment. Hell of a geometry lesson, he said. Did they finally stop laughing? Laughter's over. Phase 2 is denial. She didn't reply. Just nodded and kept walking. Across the diplomatic channels, emergency discussions erupted. Earth's symbolic status was under immediate review. 4 empires suspended trade agreements with the Krylock. 2 offered training exchanges with Earth's sniper division. 1 extremely confused species filed for cultural asylum, without specifying from what. In the highest tier of the Colosseum, a historian from the Reticulan archives whispered into a recorder, "Today, Earth redefined elegance. And they did it with clumsy knees and a perfect shot." Mira reached the exit platform. Before stepping out of view, she paused. Cameras refocused, drones pivoted, lights recentered. She turned her head just enough for her voice to carry. "You mocked our stride. You should have watched our aim." Then she disappeared into the corridor, leaving behind only silence, shattered expectations, and the shot that rewrote the rules.